Welcome. Hey, it's Frame Rate.
Hey.
That's the one where we rate frames, ain't it?
Which one? Oh, yeah. The movie.
It's a Frame Rate. I'm Abe Epperson. I'm one of the co-hosts.
Michael Frame. The show's named after me. And it's about deciding if I'm good or bad.
It's thumbs up,
I
thumbs
just
down.
asked my friends.
My friend Michael.
Come on, am I good? Am I good, please?
This week, it's a thumbs up.
All right, and we are out of here. Podcast time. No, we're acting crazy because we're crazy today.
Yeah.
It's a day of insanity. Mm-hmm.
And that's partly due to the topic of today, which is 2012's Seven Psychopaths.
I set them up, you knock them down. That's right, Seven Psychopaths. Down. What year did you say?
2012.
2012. Not too long ago. Okay, I'm just trying to set my mind to that year. The
Only
world
8
was
years.
going to end, according to Mayan calendars.
Mm-hmm.
I was huddled in a bunker drinking my own urine because of what the Mayans said. Okay, I'm there. Yeah, great film. Sam Rockwell, if you haven't seen it. Michael Stuhlbarg, I mean, he's not in it for long, but I mention him because he's
the second face you see.
He's so good. And
he's so good.
Yeah, a lot of great people. Christopher Walken, notable.
Tom Waits.
Yeah. Written and directed by Martin McDonagh, who also brought you In Bruges and fucking Ebbing, Missouri Billboard Time. Let's talk about it. That one with the long title. Yeah, that's what we're digging into. And we're not alone. We have another psychopath with us. So
3 psychopaths.
Why don't you introduce yourself, third psychopath, in some crazy way that makes me laugh with a deep belly laugh.
Oh my God. My name is Jordan, likes to eat babies breeding. I don't know how I got that name.
That's great.
Yeah, crushed it.
You did it. Welcome, Jordan.
Can I be in the Psycho Club? I eat babies.
Can I be in the psych?
You are.
Yeah, you're in.
We're 3/7 of the way there. And let's just launch right into this, bitch. We usually do that by asking our phenomenal guest, thanks for taking the time, and let me pick the part of your brain about Seven Psychopaths. What'd you, first of all, had you seen the movie before? Did you watch it for this? And what'd you think?
I had seen the movie before. I saw In Bruges when I was in college, I think, and I loved it so much. I saw Six Shooter, and so when Seven Psychopaths came out, which was my junior year, I saw it in our little theater on campus, and I like it a lot. I actually think it's my least favorite of the 4 things that he's released, potentially, but I still really like it a lot. I love Martin
I'm
McDonagh.
unaware of Six Shooter, so fuck me. Is that another McDonagh movie?
It is, but it's a short film. It's but it's like a novella. It's like 40 minutes or something, if I'm not mistaken.
I love that. It's so, I mean, talk about hard to make. I mean, he's Martin McDonagh at this point, so he can get it done, but no one makes 40-minute films.
I think
everyone makes 40-minute shows. That's interesting.
I think it won
Well, he's
Best
a playwright,
Short, right?
I don't know.
Let me rephrase
you.
that. It won Best Short.
I have not heard of it, so I don't know. But I do love Martin McDonagh. I think it's important we pull out him as the through line. And as Abe mentioned, he started as a playwright, and I knew him as a playwright before he made the jump to film.
Right.
And that's rare. I mean, you got Tom Stoppard and you got Martin McDonagh, where it's like, wow, he nailed it. He did it. He did the leap. He leapt from one medium to the other, and it's still good. Because he used to do, these amazing plays. Like, I don't know if anyone's familiar with Pillow Man. Daniel O'Brien recommended it to me, and I became obsessed with it. So good. So he is a very renowned playwright, which oftentimes points to you not being able to disjoint time as much as you need to. And something that I always admired about McDonagh films, and Seven Psychopaths specifically, is it couldn't be a play. It's rare when a playwright makes the jump to films and they write films that could not be plays. That use the medium.
He's getting better.
And he's
gotten better.
Yeah, speak to that. What do you mean by that exactly? Or you think Ebbing, Missouri shows more film craft than In Bruges?
Absolutely.
Oh, man.
And I think that this shows more than In Bruges. It's more of everything's about the writing, really, but when it comes down to, like, if we want to just talk directorially, he has more complex shots. So he's developing in terms of the medium. He uses visual tactics in order to display information for the story more often. Now, this doesn't mean that he's... it doesn't mean that the film is like chef's kiss directorially, in
like
my
Birdman
opinion,
or whatever.
but it's or whatever. But it's showing that he's actually putting his mind behind the craft of directing the eye, as opposed to directing the mind. I don't know what the equivalent would be.
Dude, Birdman is like a top 5 film as well. So I'm glad we're already mentioned that. That's been brought up. Unless you hate it, but I freaking love Birdman.
I think I think the story's fine. I think the directing is
okay.
Next
That's fair.
level. The directing's kind of the star of the show.
Yeah.
This is not about Birdman.
Well, I was just gonna say his argument with the critic is one of my favorite little, I don't know, discussions I've seen in a movie, but it's fine. We don't have to talk about Birdman.
All right, we'll get you back for Birdman. But man, but case in point about what Abe's talking about, I forgot how much I love the opening shot of this, which does come from, it's a playwright's wheelhouse because it involves complicated blocking. And that's the kind of trick you pull off in a play where you're like, look, they memorized the lines so perfectly that everything times up. That must have taken a lot of rehearsing. And I love that opening shot where the Jack of Diamonds slowly, like It Follows style, the entire scene is walking at a steady clip from the far background to the foreground, and it ends with him shooting the 2 guys in the head that we are looking at in the foreground. Yeah. That, just, I mean, you barely think about it because you're just letting it wash over you, and it feels cool, but it's even cooler to pause and reflect on the fact that Stuhlbarg and Associate had to perfectly time out that conversation
like a
with the
2-minute
squibs.
conversation.
Unless it was all CG, but it looked like squibs.
I think it was CG, actually.
Okay, that would make this shot a lot easier to accomplish, but I still just love the idea of they're like, okay, this scene takes 2 minutes and 14 seconds because that's how long it takes Sam Rockwell to, spoiler alert, Sam Rockwell to walk up from the background and shoot them in the head as the Jack of Diamonds. And talk about a killer. Like, so I'm going to leave this task to Jordan. Jordan, could you describe like the feel of the movie or what it's about, elevator pitch for people who don't even know what we're talking about? I'm sure most of our fans are aware of Seven Psychopaths, but in case someone hasn't seen it, what is this madness?
Yeah, it's a lot of that like movie within a movie where somebody in the movie is either writing the movie or is getting the inspiration to eventually write the movie. So it's a screenwriter in LA struggling to write his next movie, and the only idea he has is that it's called Seven Psychopaths, and he has one psychopath, and then he starts accumulating more psychopaths as it goes until eventually he can write his screenplay successfully, presumably.
Which is presumably the screenplay for the movie that we're watching.
That's my assumption.
That's my takeaway. I mean, I guess it could theoretically be some third unrelated screenplay that's also called Seven Psychopaths, but I think it's an Ouroboros, right? Like, I think it's structurally supposed to be, it's like Adaptation. You're watching the movie, and the movie's about the process that produced the movie that you're watching, which is a fun little trick because, of course, that shouldn't be possible. How could you write it about?
I was actually trying to think of, because I was trying to think of Charlie Kaufman, for example.
Also loves to do that, yeah.
Or like Ferris Bueller, or like French Lieutenant's Woman or something like that. That has narrators that speak directly past the fourth wall to the audience. Right. He doesn't do this, and I was trying to think of what it's like, the removal of the veneer of story and the wall breaks. It doesn't have to be entirely Brechtian. The one that I thought of that this most is similar to is actually Arrested Development. There's a narrator, they know the outcome of the story and reflexively reference their placement out of the story's time, and it's usually played for jokes. Like, the characters themselves aren't aware of the shape of the story, meaning like the beginning, the middle, and the end, directly to us, but they're taking turns writing it with their insane actions.
Almost Shakespeare in Love-ish also, where it's that tactic of like...
yeah, a little bit.
You, like, Sam Rockwell at the midpoint says, or I'm sorry, Colin Farrell says, I think the screenplay should end with they just drive into the desert and they just sit and talk about their feelings.
Yeah, exactly.
And he goes, that's stupid. It should end in a giant shootout. And then the movie ends with them going to the desert, talking about their feelings, and then there's a giant shootout. So it's like they take turns controlling reality.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I usually like movies that have a core message that I can really get behind, or at least like fascinates me to think about. Seven Psychopaths feels like it is what it is, meaning like it feels like a challenge McDonagh set for himself where he said, what if all I had was a title? And it's almost like a homework assignment where you're just showing off that you can bullshit beautifully for 2 hours.
I agree.
It doesn't, I don't know that it gets at anything too sweeping or deep. It's just like, what if all I had was a title and I just started and all I have at my disposal are storytelling tools? And that's why the movie includes these vignettes where it's like, within this movie, within a movie, Tom Waits will come and say, I have a story. And it'll cut to his short film of his movie. And so like, it's almost a collection of short stories that are just about psychopaths. And the other thing I really thought was interesting.
I literally wrote that down. That's
hilarious. Really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, then let's live in this for a minute. So does that cheapen it? I mean, do you think, like, I don't know, Jordan, do you feel with
let's go to Jordan.
Yeah, do you get like an empty feeling? Is it empty calories, this movie? That's what I found myself asking this time.
No, so, I mean, that was one of the things that I actually wrote down. McDonagh is so good at small stories and then dash 6-shooter, which, you know, if you like that element of him, like the stories within stories within stories, there's a lot of good ones in 6-shooter, but I feel like it kind of comes down to, you remember when he's sitting in the desert and he's sitting in the chair and he's talking about his movie, he does say something like he wants it to be life affirming or whatever. He's like, I don't want it to be violent. It feels like partially the writing, like it's about the writing process a little bit. And I don't know, I was trying to get into this.
Which I usually hate. I can't believe he did it and it worked on me. I usually think that's so hacky.
I mean, yeah, because it does call attention to itself without ever saying... Like
Colin Farrell is clearly Martin McDonagh, right? Like, come on.
Yeah. That's the thing is, I was also appreciative that they let them use their actual accents. Like, I just love Colin Farrell's Irish accent, and like his girlfriend was able to use her Australian accent. But just this idea of like, because usually you have the the omnipotent narrator would be like, look at all the ways that I've set up the story for this perfect revenge finale. But instead he's saying, imagine if I wrote a story that had a great setup for a revenge finale and then we went into the desert, like you're saying, and then they did. But then it feels like Sam Rockwell's character is like, what, creativity or like money or something? Just this like this presence that comes in and like destroys kind of the story that he was trying to write. I don't know.
Well, it's almost like when writers say, which has never happened to me, so I don't believe in it, but writers say, I was writing this and then the character took on a life of their own. I didn't decide that he would be her father. The character did that.
Oh, that's actually a good
point.
I feel like Sam Rockwell is a living embodiment of the character you're writing that takes on a life of its own.
Even Tom Waits at the end is a little bit like the Tom Waits that he wrote probably would go stab him, but then the Tom Waits in the movie realizes, oh, like, well, maybe I wouldn't kill him.
There's nothing I can do to this guy that already hasn't happened.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, I'm not going to scare him into being a better man or something.
Sure. Well, he only kills serial killers, and Colin Farrell isn't a serial killer, so I guess he still lives by his code.
Right.
What I realized is that, like, both the vignettes that are pretty clear, like the montages, and the what I would call like the film proper, I guess, which is like the main arc, are actually all little clever premises that someone fucked themselves over or did something that they end up regretting. So when you look at it like this, everyone's a vignette. Woody, Sam Rockwell, Colin Farrell, Christopher Walken, they're all actually vignettes. They're just intertwined in one story. Because the reason I think that that's important is that's why that if we're looking for meaning and like the poignancy of the lesson that he seems to point to in this movie, which I think Michael is alluding to, kind of comes to a head when we do the final beat of the Vietnamese priest arc, which is finished by Walken, who's a man and Walken is a man who's lost everything. So if there's any one main point to me, it's obviously this scene, and what he says in the scene is he says something along the lines of seeing the light instead of the darkness. His quote is, "It might," he says, as the Buddhist monk, it might help. Yeah. Right. It might actually do something. Yeah. So right. And I think that's why it works on you. That's probably why it works on you, because it's such a big offer.
Yeah, I was thinking when Michael was saying that, it's like everybody in it is sacrificing themselves for something. Like originally when Walken pulls out his recorder and gets shot, I was very confused because it didn't seem like a point. But obviously he was calling in the cops to help at the end. But even Sam Rockwell earlier in the movie says stuff like Colin Farrell asked him why he's killing people, and it was to help him make the movie. And even at the end, right. I think his sacrifice, like him getting killed, was to let Colin Farrell get away. But ultimately, it feels like all these people are doing these things just to get a movie made, which is interesting.
Right. Self-fulfilling prophecy, because it's the movie we're watching.
Right.
So that's the McDonagh like kind of twist that I think he puts it. I think that at the top of the podcast when you guys were talking about the Ouroboros, I think that's the elucidation of that. I do think that there is actually an additional point to the movie though, because when you look at the context of what the Buddhist monk is saying about like his "it might" comment about the and that was specifically the protest of the violence of the Vietnam War. And then also things start to fall in line, because I think he's making like Seven Psychopaths, it's nodded at it, the title itself. I don't think that this movie is specifically trying to make someone quote might be like someone might become better or steer people away from making horrible decisions or violence. But I think he is trying to shit on violent movies a bit. Colin Farrell, at one point, Marty says that he doesn't want his hitman story to be too violent, and he refuses to pick up a gun in like that notable, that's the true final shootout of the movie, is when he refuses to pick up the gun.
Yeah, and I think he's also trying to clearly delineate, just because I write about movies where people die in it, it doesn't mean I endorse in real life you should. It's actually like it's a statement about the difference between storytelling and reality.
Well, it's a difference between him and Tarantino potentially too, because this movie has tons of Tarantino vibes, but it doesn't revel in the violence necessarily in the way that a Tarantino movie might. Like a lot of the violence is there and some of it's cool and to a point, but a lot of it leads to tragedy in a lot heavier way, I feel like, than your average.
In a grounded way. Yeah, Tarantino also likes interwoven vignettes, but I would say that McDonagh has earned that right for sure, because like he's been doing that since back in the day. His like Pillow Man, the play I reference, is also, because it's about the police become interested in a writer and they start to question him because he's a horror writer and every little short story he writes starts coming true. And they think he's doing it, but it's actually a copycat killer, mimicking whatever he writes about. And so again, in the structure of that, every 10 minutes we stop to be like, someone will be like, so what's one of these stories you wrote? And he'll go like, all right, so there's this guy. Like Martin McDonagh loves stories where a writer in the story gathers everyone around and tells a story. So I definitely think it's a statement about storytelling itself. And I think that especially ties into the ending with the Christopher Walken, because Christopher Walken basically uses the power of storytelling to say, you have this angry ball of angst you have created in this Vietnamese character that you don't know what to do with, and it seems like it's going to end badly. That's what they always reference. It's going to end badly. This Vietnamese dude's going to cause some kind of horror. And then he says, what about if in the end of the movie we say fuck that, and those horrible thoughts were just his thoughts about what he could have done, when what he's actually doing is something beautiful and sacrificial in the name of the potential of goodness. So it's interesting. I think Jordan's absolutely right that it's about sacrifice, but I also do think it's about the power of narrative to, like, you can tell the same story about the same hitman and it could be life affirming or it could be completely nihilistic and cynical. there's like a verve to storytelling and a style, right? You overlay. That's what storytelling is. It's not reality. It's elements of reality overlaid with your consciousness, like with your point of view. And I think he's taking full advantage of that in a cool way that also sort of comments on it.
A bit on the Tarantino too. McDonagh's hitmen are equally snarky and verbose as Tarantino's hitmen.
The opening scene feels really
right.
Tarantino.
It feels like Royale with cheese. Additionally, he paints like a reality that's a cartoon. How his characters act, how they listen, it's all like non-real. And Tarantino does that too, but McDonagh even more so, I think, with the cartoonish elements. His people are free to become complete clowns. And I think that's because he's a better writer than Tarantino. His throwaway scenes feel like improv, so they're like written with a good pace and they're funnier. Tarantino is undoubtedly a better director because his film rhetoric and quotationalism is off the charts.
It's just powerful.
But it's probably because he was introduced to us in the 90s, but he feels he's punk rock. McDonagh wouldn't really dare say that. It's all taste, but I feel like Tarantino actually makes that mistake, and this is kind of a better version of a Tarantino film. Like, I like that McDonagh doesn't take himself seriously. It feels more fun. I'm more free as an audience member to enjoy the results of just being in a story.
Yeah, I think.
Whereas Tarantino is like, look at how cool this is.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too. Like, Tarantino is very clearly trying to deliver dialogue in a way that feels realistic, if elevated to some extent, usually. Yeah. But I was just writing this down. Everything feels so written because so many times Sam Rockwell is the worst at this, but they all do it. It's like they'll double lines immediately, exact same wording.
Oh, I love doubling lines. You don't like it?
No, I think it's amazing. That's what I'm saying. The
Coen brothers do that all the time too.
Exactly.
We love it.
But that's what I'm saying. Coen brothers,
the mezzanine.
Yeah, Coen brothers characters they also talk in a way that feels a lot more written and intelligent than an average. It feels more like a play, which obviously makes sense, but just like, I don't know, they're like, honey, I meant chlamydia or something. And then she sits down and he sits down and goes, honey, I meant chlamydia or something. Just
Yeah. Or I love there's even one where Rockwell's just like, well, I don't know, buddy, but that's what I'm thinking. And he just goes, huh? And he goes, well, I don't know, buddy, but that's what I'm thinking. Exact same line reading. Yeah.
Oh, shoot.
You must have not heard me,
Weekly?
so I'll deliver it.
Yeah.
It's so good. I think that's his kind of his superpower is those kinds of tricks. Yeah. That's a level of writing that Tarantino, I don't think maybe he'll get there, but his writing is so like I'm trying to think of exactly
I think
what the
we've
word
seen
is,
what we're going to see out of Tarantino.
I don't think
I'd be shocked if he had a massive change in directions in him.
I don't think he quite aspires to this exactly, unless he does what he says he's going to do, and he gives up and starts writing only plays or whatever. Like he refuses to make movies and switch mediums. But anyway, I don't know.
There's no way in hell that's happening. Trust me.
I would watch a Tarantino show on Broadway. That would be funny as hell.
It would be so weird. It would be done as like a bit. Like there's no way he can't separate himself from like the historical narrative of the history of all cinema.
I guess
like that's who
what
the
he
guy
has.
is.
That's what he is.
Yeah. That like it's. The idea of him jumping to a play, he would hang himself. Like he would hate it because he wouldn't be able to show you he wouldn't be able to show you each shot. He would lose it.
He would probably have like a jumbotron.
Play.
Yeah.
I
feel like maybe he would probably be the guy that like all the characters would just have like 600 squibs on him just so he could still get that same feel
throughout the course of the play.
Bloody.
It was going to be like
squibs
it's going to be like a 4D experience where like the crowd is getting blasted with blood every 5 minutes. Amazing.
Tarantino, that guy's.
I'll just say this: in high school, my buddies and I did Usual Suspects as a one-act play. It did not go over well. So I don't think action thriller, crime thrillers really translate to the stage. Hey, can I bring up something I thought was weird about this movie?
Yeah.
Do it.
I mean, it's very quirky and weird and specific and like intentionally specific, right? Martin McDonagh is like, I'm interesting. I think of odd things. I think that's part of the offering. But I noticed this watch through way more than I did the first time. I've only seen it twice. And the second time I was like, I didn't realize how not broken, but how intentionally not correct the structure is. It's almost like the first half of the movie is a very tightly plotted thing about plot twists and turns, about finding out who are the 7 psychopaths. And it even ends with the punchline of, oh, he's psychopath 1 and 7. It was him. That's the reveal. That almost is a movie. It feels a lot like Full Metal Jacket's the only other movie I can think of that did this. You're like, there's the part of the movie where you're finding out about who all the psychopaths are. Then there's another equally long section where they're in the desert talking about writing and what the movie is. Right. It's almost like watching, it's like if he showed 6 Shooter and then afterwards there was another 40 minutes of the characters in character being like, what do you think of what we just went through in 6 Shooter? Right. He kind of bakes that into this, and that's so interesting to me, and it's so perfect that it's the desert, because as someone who goes desert camping a lot, that is where you would go to be like, we got to take a step back, depart from this reality, and just observe and think about it. You go to the desert, man. That's where you're apart from everything and you're just looking at it.
Do you feel like there's an element where so obviously Colin Farrell very literally says, what if I made a movie like that, basically, where you have the first half of the movie is perfect and violent, and then the second half is just talking in the desert. It almost felt like him flexing a little bit to be like, I'm going to draw you in. I can make this perfect movie, this Tarantino-esque crime thriller or whatever, and then I'm just gonna say no, because that's a thing that he wants to convey, is like he needed to prove that he could before he could deconstruct it, I guess, to some extent. I don't know. It felt so intentional to me that you're right. Like it's that perfect setup. It gets right there, and then it's like, yeah, just screw it. And then the movie just really, the tension is so low after that. Even the shootout stuff, you're not really that worried about anyone, or at least I wasn't.
It's more funny. It's magical. Well, Abe and I both laughed really hard when Sam Rockwell shoots the driver of the car. Like suddenly, just because the writer wants him to. We've never seen him show this level of prowess before. Sam Rockwell can hit you in the head with a handgun from like 300 yards away if he wants.
Yeah,
apparently.
He's a crack shot. Yeah. It just opens up with the most brilliant shot
like a
ever.
Sniper
and then
shot, but from a pistol. Yeah.
Yeah, but immediately like is not that good at shooting guns after that. Like he's kind of like hitting wild. Sometimes, mainly
and I love,
missing.
Throw down the other gun. I have 2 guns. I saw a 3rd gun. Oh, you're good. You're good.
You're good. You're good. Yeah, you're absolutely right about the movie being like it's like a bisection. The first half of the movie, typical movie characters. The second we hit the desert, they're writing the screenplay, and it kind of turns into like that's the whole bit with him in the graveyard. He's literally writing the story, and we're watching that. He does that a few times. I guess McDonagh.
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess it's all swirling together, and the problem is with that second bit. And I guess it's not a problem depending on how much value you put up on this. But
I think he did what he wanted to do. He probably doesn't regret what he did. But go ahead.
A result is that when you abandon the suspension of disbelief, you just don't have stakes. I just can't care what happens to any of them because they're chess pieces at this point, right? So I think that's why the poignancy of the lesson, whatever he's actually trying to grasp for, it kind of feels like a moot point at that point because it doesn't strike home. I know that's a high standard to put movies to, but I mean, if you're going to make a statement like it might help, like you take a shot at the king, you best not miss kind of thing, I guess. Yeah. So like, that's why I would come down hard on.
Well, that's why I liked In Bruges more, I think.
I like In Bruges. I think it's better.
Okay.
Well, In Bruges is more focused.
Yeah.
It's more focused.
This is a wild ride.
I just mean, I feel In Bruges every time he jumps off of that clock tower or whatever. Yeah. Or the bell tower. And I'm like, characters. Oh my God.
Did you guys not get feels when, and it's partially the performance, but I really get choked up when it's the nonchalance with which Chris Walken says, so she's dead now, unfortunately. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
that breaks my
that's-
heart. I love that moment.
I mean, that's one of the powers of Walken is that he seems like an absolute maniac 100% of the time, and then
when
out
he
of
says something
nowhere,
earnest,
says
you're like,
something
whoa.
really, really
Yeah.
well, and you go, "Oh, that's why I forgot. He's really good, actually.
Yeah.
He's just playing to like kind of how everyone thinks
He's
of Walken,
kooky.
you
Yeah.
know."
Well, I felt like that kookiness because obviously she doesn't get a lot of screen time and their relationship doesn't get a lot of screen time. I like, for some reason, his like weird mannerisms sold me on their marriage faster. Like this idea that be like, yeah, Christopher Walken's weird, but I could see enjoying that kind of quirkiness. You're like, you tell me not to steal government.
Yeah.
Tell me not to steal. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
So I agree. That was the moment that
he-
hooked for me, but that was like 40 minutes in or whatever, right?
Yeah, and I think we do got to come down on him for, I don't think it's acceptable to just lampshade that you can't write female characters. That doesn't
Right.
excuse it.
No, yeah.
That's the one that I thought, that's weak sauce, when he's like, all your female characters suck. They all get shot. They have nothing to say. And he's like, well, it's hard to write
That's
girls.
actually...
And I'm like, it's funny that you're drawing attention to it, but it doesn't fix that your movie is totally Chris Nolan.
Or that all your
Chris Nolan-ing
characters agree. We all agree your characters, you've called them psychopaths, and they're all severely flawed, but they're also all homophobes. That's another thing.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask is, so in every movie that he's made, he has, like homophobic comments and has racist comments essentially, and I know it's character driven, but you still start to get to a point, it's like with Tarantino where at a certain point you're like, do you have to write the N-word that often, or
are you the guy to say that?
Exactly.
Does that have to come from you?
Like,
he has a little of that for sure.
7 lesbians who are disabled and work through their spazzy shit, and 2 of them are black. That line, I'm like,
bad line.
It's a bad line, and it's because it's done for a joke.
Right.
I think that's the crucial part that a lot of people say, like, oh, if it's a buzzword, well, okay, well, now I have to hate it or like it or have an opinion on it. Well, the context matters. This guy is really not winning because he's making a joke out of it almost 100% of the time. When he's dropping an F-bomb or, talking about a gay dog and his gay head, it's done to laugh at. And I remember, like, me and Mike, all we could do is kind of muster, kind of weak, kind of like, this is awkward.
Well, it's
laughs,
like, I get what you're
know?
going for, because that structure used to be not acceptable because it was cruel, but that structure used to be very prevalent where you're like in The Office, there's a whole episode about it where Michael Scott is like, well, I'm not calling him gay as I am calling him gay as an insult, but not because it's bad to be gay. It's just when I was in middle school, gay is the insult. It's just like an interchangeable insult. And you're like, I understand that. That view is fading from reality, and you look like a real dickhead when you do that. But it was a thing. Like, I get the structure of the joke.
It's
I
also
guess,
logically inconsistent.
Well,
right.
So it's wrong from all perspectives.
The gay head joke is also, it's a straight up rip off of his joke in Bruges where he's like, how about a gay beer for my gay friend and a normal beer for me because I'm normal? And he goes, your gay dog with your gay head. And he goes, he has a normal head. And it's like,
that's right.
A very
that's what I mean.
weird
Is it's the
echo joke.
laziest, most time-honored juvenile junior high joke, right? That's gay.
Right.
And you don't even mean that thing is homosexual, or you used to mean like that thing sucks, and it's like, well, that's the problem. You can't synonymize those concepts. But we can move on. I don't know. It is problematic, and it does suck, and I wish that he didn't put those lines in there.
Well, I feel like that's one of the things.
The other big offender, I just rewatched Frasier. Frasier's homophobic as hell. For like 2 smart dudes, they mostly just make jokes about how each other might be gay. We really got a problem with homophobia. Yeah. It is rampant, dude. And up till very, very recently, it's like completely unchecked and unchallenged. But I'm happy to live at a time where that's changing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did we kill the podcast?
It's not. No. It's just not beyond me that Frasier would be homophobic as all hell. That scans, I guess.
Yeah. Well, sitcoms are the worst because they take lazy jokes, and being gay was the laziest joke of the 90s. Everyone was using it.
I do feel like this isn't necessarily the same thing, but just talking about a thing that I feel like he was ahead of the curve a bit on was that thing at the end. He's talking about, I don't remember specifically what he was, but they were talking about Christopher Walken's character, and he's like, yeah, his wife had died and he was asleep. And they were like, how can you sleep? Like, I would be so mad. And he goes, well, he's a proper Christian, not like these Fox News fucks. And I was like, oh, he called it a little ahead of the curve. I mean, I'm sure other people were aware of that, obviously. But I don't know. For me, I was like, my whole family looked at each other and we're like, because we watched it as a family. We were like, oh, he got it. He was he knew it before we did.
He knew that in 2012, yeah. A little early to know.
I mean, a little early, not too early.
Fox was Fox has been stinking up the joint for a long time, but
they have. But my whole family is historically pretty conservative, and it wasn't until Trump that everybody was like, "Oh,
ooh,
maybe we should think through some of this." So anyway,
when was the Colbert Report?
What
like
about
when did it launch?
Yeah. So that it's not too early because like we were making that observation in 2005,
on Colbert.
Right?
Yeah,
that's true. I mean,
but he's also a European author, which is interesting, and I think it's actually interesting to watch In Bruges, thinking of it as a European filmmaker writing a film set in Europe, and then this as the same filmmaker writing a film set in America. And the same thing's true about Ebbing, Missouri. I think you do part of the unreality and part of the surreality of his movies I think you get a tinge of what he thinks about America. But it's not but he doesn't live in America, or he might now. But I mean, his work often strikes me when he writes about America. It's an outsider's perspective on America in interesting ways, where he has the caricature of America is very present of like, that's why this movie's so obsessed with, Sam Rockwell's so obsessed with guns. And they're talking about, should there be a gun in the movie? Should there not? In Europe, they have a sort of different relationship with guns and guns in media. So I think he's fascinated by violence in media, and specifically American media and American film. And In Bruges certainly is also about guys running around with guns. But like you said, it feels more focused. It feels more like it has one point, whereas Seven Psychopaths feels like a wild ride with lots of flashing colors. And it's interesting to me to think of it through the eyes of, I wonder if even a little bit of that is like, I know what the Americans will fancy. Lots of bang bang and crazy lines and gay jokes. Yeah.
Kind of like that scene in Birdman, just saying, where he says, you guys love this shit. You see the sparkle in your eyes.
But it's Birdman didn't have Tom Waits, so it automatically is inferior.
With a bunny. Yeah. With a bunny.
That's fair. Undeniable.
Oh, if you get Tom Waits in your movie, that's half the work. You've already got a decent movie, I would say.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah. It's also, there's a little bit of Sorkin in this, too. That's the other weird thing.
Walk with me, talk with me.
Yeah, I mean it's the pacing. I keep coming back to how like Sorkin made, like him or hate him, he did make the pacing of television and movies. He did influence it wildly. I'm pretty sure it started with him. I mean, because it's not like we haven't had like fast talking as a thing in movies, like. Preston Sturges, Howard Hawks, fucking Marx Brothers.
Oh my God. If you watch a Preston Sturges movie, it's surreal. He directed them to talk as fast as they can. Like people deliver the dialogue like as fast as they can. Yeah, it's crazy.
And it's so like, it's obvious it existed. We knew about it. It's a bit, but then people started using it as like a impression of that era because it felt like that mid-Atlanta accent.
Yeah, there's that Family Guy joke. Fast talking high trousers is the name of the show.
I bet my Pulitzer on it. And it's so it disappeared for a while, but then we started getting like our West Wings and such, and like it's now like scenes need to move very quickly, and it's feels very uncontrolled and slapdash, and it's, I don't know, that's something that I don't know if most directors and writers would move that fast if it weren't for Sorkin. And I wonder what I don't know. I wonder what McDonagh would do with a movie like this if there weren't a Tarantino and there weren't like a Sorkin. Like I think it actually might have been better. I think he would. I think
if
he was
he had
actually
the flail
making
for different touchstones, like if there was a universe with no Tarantino or Sorkin.
Right. I think McDonagh loves like movie cliches and writing cliches, but he gets too into the weeds with doing like literal like, okay, what would Quentin Tarantino do? You know, and then that's what I'm going to lampoon kind of thing.
Michael, you've seen.
I'd rather he just did a crime story.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Michael. So we were actually supposed to see one of his plays, whatever his most recent one was, but COVID. How do they talk in Pillowman? I mean, is it as quippy? Because part of me feels like it's a play thing as well, not just.
It's extremely quirky. What I think McDonagh loves, which is a very great technique for a writer of dialogue, is for people to say things that are fresh or worded in a way that you haven't heard before so that it feels like uniquely them, right? Like you could say kill them all, but instead you say I'm going to kill each and every one of those motherfuckers with a pool cue. And you're like, that's more specific. It's fresh. It implies that character has a worldview and interesting details about them that I'm not necessarily privy to. Why would they pick a pool cue? Whatever. He's big on that, and it definitely has a lot of that. But it also, I would say, Pillowman, its main comparison point is that it constantly goes into short horror stories.
Right.
But Pillowman does the classic playwriting thing where people have speeches where they literally like call out the point of the play a lot more. I don't think Seven Psychopaths spoon feeds you the point very much.
Gotcha.
It's an easy to follow ride, but I've had to have this conversation with you guys to have it click and be like, oh, there is a statement about storytelling and the nature of, you're right, Jordan. There's something about violence and whether violent films need to include violence, or you could tell the same story, blah, blah, blah. But that's not what jumps out at you, right? What jumps out at you is like, man, remember that funny line? Man, remember that part when he shot her in the stomach and you're like, I didn't see that coming. And when Pillowman, the things that jump out are lines like, what does it mean when someone comes into a room and tells you there's been a murder? No, it means that a man has come into a room and told you there's been a murder. And I'm like, that's true. That's very interesting to think about. What you know is strictly limited to your perceptions. You can only know, you can't trust any information whatsoever. So it's like, I feel like playwrights are more concerned with mental conundrums that are easily stated that then tickle your brain. Whereas, of course, movies have the benefit, like I pointed out, of going, forget the mental conundrum, zoom in on that. Look at that. It's like
now people are thinking about that.
Now you don't need to put it in words. You just showed them a picture and they're thinking about it. So it definitely, that's what I do admire, is he adapted. He did not write the exact same kind of script he would have written in playwriting land. And yet he maintained his style. His like, I'm going to write a story that has 10 little stories in it and they're all going to interconnect in a Tarantino-esque style. Like his plays very much feel like his films, and yet all of his plays take place in one location and all of his films jump around, which I think is great. Good. Like you got you got from a bike into a car and you knew how to drive it. That's good for you.
Good job. And I think he's getting better. And I think he deserves
and yet,
a career.
We could have totally. He deserves his career. I'm a huge fan.
I'm a fan.
I think we could have a very fruitful conversation about how Ebbing, Missouri is racist on some levels. So he has. Yeah, he's a weird one. He has issues that ping my problematic radar, but I still really like him.
Yeah, I think it's just because he's very smart. He's just backward in some of his assumptions.
Just like he is of the older generation. Yeah,
and I think he's enough of a thinker that I think that he could learn. And he could be like, oh, I'm going to listen instead of talk on this podcast.
I'd like to think that like his next movie won't have any gay jokes because he'll realize, well, it's 2021 now. I'm going to stop that shit.
Yeah.
You'd hope.
Yeah, and I hope that's how we should hope, and ad hoc like hope people are going to react to this kind of thing, is the realization that when you're wrong, you you correct yourself.
Yeah.
You know,
and again, it's all about
so
context.
we'll
The
see.
point is, you could make a gay joke where it's at the expense of gay people if it's clear that that character's wrong for doing that. And that's
Right.
how we're learning that they're a dickhead. It depends on how you're handling it. So we could see him handle it better in the future, and that would be good.
Yeah, but so far,
that's what I felt
Nevertheless,
was
Seven
tricky.
Psychopaths remains fun to watch for me.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know where you want to take this. I had a couple of weird observations that I wanted to point out.
Oh, here comes Cracked, boy. All right, Cracked it. Do it.
Well, one of the
Why don't they make the whole psychopath out of the black box? And
No, not that at all. This is like an Easter egg. It's none of that.
Oh, okay, good.
Although I do have one of those too. But I won't say it now. When he's looking in the mirror and he's talking to himself, like when he's when Sam Rockwell is getting ready for the party or whatever. He says, he's talking to himself and he says something about him being Billy Bickle. But,
when he's like, "Oh, Dimitri, that's a cool name."
Yeah. But Travis Bickle is the taxi driver guy, right? So like, surely
Yes.
that has to be why his name is that, because he's a lunatic.
And why he's looking in the mirror practicing "Are you
Yeah.
talking to me?" type dialogue.
Exactly.
I just thought
For
that was
sure.
really interesting. And so I watched some of this movie on Prime, because it's free on Prime if you have a subscription. And they have that X-ray thing.
Yeah.
And apparently, like, during another scene, when he's talking to his wife for the first time in the hospital, walk-in, they page Dr. Blair, Dr. Jane Hamilton, which is like a reference to a friggin' Queensryche song about a hitman or something. So it's
Okay.
this is kind of
Is it a cameo? It's a cameo, right?
I guess it's some. Or
I think it's just an Easter egg, right? It's just an audible background dialogue.
Oh yeah. It's just like they're like
Paging Dr. blah, blah, blah.
Right,
Paging
but
Dr. Queenstrike.
presumably there's
that.
lyrics in the song. I don't actually know the song. I just, when we're talking about like gay jokes and stuff, it's just interesting to me for a guy who's clearly as smart and has such a wide breadth of stuff and like
And detail oriented.
It's like, yeah, I don't know. It is confusing, like that gay joke, especially a recycled gay joke. It's so weird and off-putting to an extent that I know you can write an amazing joke, and you've got so many amazing actors. It's felt weird in that moment, one of the like climactic moments of the film, to have such a lame joke, and it's like it almost makes me want to like crawl back through and be like, is there something there? Is he like talking about, I don't know, like the existence of man or something? I'm sure he's not, but I don't know. I was fascinated with my little
Well,
X-ray
yeah, like it would be
pop-ups.
one thing if Woody or even Rockwell, because he's kind of like a chaotic neutral character, like we're the ones. But as you pointed out, everyone in the universe, including Colin Farrell, the likable cipher everyman, makes gay jokes where gay people are the butt of the joke, and there's no gay characters to defend or speak up for themselves.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, we're piling on. But yes, I agree. It doesn't scan. It's not right.
Yeah,
It doesn't
anyway.
track well.
If you want a cracked observation, I just thought it was interesting how long
We love those. I didn't
Yeah.
mean to turn you off of those. That's what we live for.
I just thought how interesting it was that nobody ever comes to check on her in the hospital for like such a long time. Like
That's in a world that's surreal. The hardest thing for me to buy was that Woody Harrelson could sit there with the chrome-plated pistol all day in the hospital. That did bother me.
well, it's like he sat there
you
with her,
mentioned that.
he talked to her, then he shot her, then he goes downstairs, then Christopher Walken goes up and cradles her. I mean, it's like hours, presumably. Doesn't
Right.
matter to me in any way. I just thought I was just watching it and it was like, how long is Christopher
No.
Walken going to sit there? Because somebody's going to freak out.
Woody Harrelson is also like, that's kind of what we were talking about with the cartoon stuff. He's impossibly dumb,
And yet
You know-
also impossibly gets away with all crime. Like he
Yeah,
never is
right.
worried about being
Right.
caught
Christopher
or punished.
Walken is acting weird. He saw him with flowers, and then he arrives back to sit down.
And you can see blood
with-
on his collar and
There's
shit.
blood
Yeah.
everywhere,
Right.
and it's just like, hey, did you? He even thought for a second, maybe that's the guy. I'm looking for an older guy, and he's got flowers, like he's gonna go see his wife or something. he almost puts it together in the hallway, but then he looks back and sees that Christopher Walken continues to walk past
Right.
the room. So he goes like, it's just some other old man.
Christopher
And
Walken came downstairs with the same flowers in his hand. Wouldn't you
same
at least
flowers,
ask?
blood
Covered in
everywhere.
blood.
It's just
What
so
happened?
obvious.
Where did you
And
go up there? Yeah.
And then he talks to he's like, what is that? And then they start talking about cravats. And then when he shows him that he has a crazy neck wound, or like scar, that's what sets him off like, oh man, get out of here.
Gross. I gotta leave.
Also weird
Instead of
because
pursuing
he's a mobster.
Instead of pursuing my vengeance vendetta, I have to leave because you're grossing me out.
Right, even though you're literally covered in blood.
Yeah, and he almost just shot someone in the head like before this,
Like a
so
few
we
minutes
can
ago,
assume
yeah.
he's done that kind of thing before. He did a murder 25 minutes ago. You know, like why would he be like, oh, whoa, get out of here?
Well,
with
Woody
this?
is the force of, and we pointed out, I think while we were watching it, his logic is also inconsistent as far as like when he spares people and when he kills people. Like he legitimately tries to shoot Colin Farrell in the head and his gun jams, but he spared Gabourey Sidibe, and it's like, why? She meant nothing to him, and he was more pissed at her. He probably would have shot her in real life, that character.
Right.
It's confusing. He is a classic villain where it's like, you don't have to understand him. He's evil. He does whatever the plot needs him to.
Well, it feels like it's just tying back in Bruges a little bit. There's this weird honor system among thieves kind of thing that he has, which is like, I don't know that it's ever very clearly defined. I guess in Bruges, the simple one is you can't kill a kid, and so that leads. Is it Ralph Fiennes?
Rafe, I think.
Rafe Fiennes.
Rafe?
Sorry, Ralph. It's his brother. And yeah, so in this one, there's like a lot of these weird, I don't know, these strange honor things that keep popping up where it's like, well, I'm a criminal, but I'm not like that kind of criminal, or like weird little things gross him out even though they shouldn't. I don't know. It's,
Right.
It's just,
And he does love to use the mob as a generic, guys with guns are coming. Why? They're in the mob. Like he loves to just not worry about it too much.
Right. Yeah. It's funny.
Like Woody Harrelson has no tortured origin story. He just is a mobster. Accept it. The end.
Right. Yeah.
I like, or the Yakuza. Right,
Yeah.
he kills mobsters, right? Or the Yakuza.
Yes. Well, and there he drops a kind of a racist joke where he says he can't write. He doesn't want to try and write any Jap dialogue.
Oh yeah, that was fucked up too. That's weird.
Yeah, Colin Farrell just dropped that.
It's weird that Martin McDonagh makes the character that represents him casually racist and homophobic.
Right.
That's odd. And I know a lot of people in Ebbing, Missouri found it that movie is nuanced enough that I think there's a conversation there on both sides. But
Sure.
I know a lot of people saw it as, well, he's trying to make a statement on race, and it's a pretty positive statement about the potential to heal eventually. And other people are like, yeah, but it's basically just forgiving the racist character. Is that our solution, to just forgive racist people? That doesn't feel like the right solution.
Right.
We made me like this movie less than I liked it when we started. That's rare for Frame Rate. Congrats.
But I really like the movie. I'm not trying to.
Yeah, it rips. I've been wanting to cover it for a long time. It's fun as hell.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't feel like I have anything
Two
else.
things can be true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Was there... Did the Zodiac Killer, was he tied to rabbits somehow in a way that I'm not remembering?
No, that was just a fiction that he invented for the movie. Which
the Zodiac
actually
Killer
thought
kept
is,
dozens of
I
rabbits.
love that
I liked it.
historical, like strange historical alterations to like.
Right, because in our
reenactments are
history,
hilarious
the
to me.
legend is the Zodiac Killer was never caught and died of old age. So it's nice.
Right.
In fact, it's very Tarantino
Right.
to change history such that he got his comeuppance. Very Tarantino.
Yeah, it's very Tarantino, especially like not recent Tarantino because he's been doing it for like almost 2 decades now.
Yeah.
But like Django, Inglourious Bastards,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, his flip the script vengeance period, which we did a great crack sketch about. That I now worry is homophobic.
A Tarantino sketch?
Now we're in dangerous territory. Did you never see the our fake Tarantino trailer starring Dylan Seaton about a
no, I
gay
don't
guy
think so.
who gets hassled by Cody Johnson, who's a homophobic preacher, and then the gay guy goes on a killing spree and kills all the homophobes. It just
can't
seems
believe
like
that
the
doesn't
natural
exist yet.
extension of
Yeah.
what Tarantino was going to do next at the time.
Right.
But it's also lampooning that like Tarantino isn't that forward thinking on these issues
Right.
that he's trying to be forward thinking on. So I always thought that there was an element of satire that, like, for example, Tarantino doesn't really expose, or even McDonagh in this case, he's doing a comedy straight up, and he's not really lampooning it in the way that we'd be like, oh, well, I see, that's clever. It's a satire. It's not just, saying those words.
Right.
I always thought that we were a cut above, but yeah, that could also.
Well, I'm just
it could
leaving the
be
door open for the fact that we could have ignorantly made mistakes. But yes, we love everyone, and we tried as hard as we could to make it about, come from a place of empathy, and the joke was at the expense of Tarantino / homophobes. But I'm just saying, when you make a sketch, when you're a cis white male and you make a sketch about gayness at all, and then 10 years pass, there's a part of your brain that wonders, was that homophobic? Did I fuck that up? That sketch 10 years ago? I forget what all the lines were. Was it bad?
Yeah, because I fucked it up before.
Go check it out and tell us what you
I
think.
fuck up all the time.
Tell us
on
if we're
a bunch of
canceled.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why wouldn't I do that?
Yeah.
You dumbass.
That's why we should only write stories about friends who do nice things together and have a lovely time.
Well,
yeah.
Then no one will get hurt.
If you didn't want
you're
story
making
to
the
help
literal
society
argument
progress.
against cancel culture right now. I mean, that is like one of the things that people are going to say, right? They're like, well, so I'm not allowed to write anything starring gay people, or I'm not allowed to write anything where bad people say bad things.
That's a legitimate.
Not that we need to get into that at the end of this frame rate, but I just think that's interesting.
I just think that's a legitimate conundrum that writers, especially cis white writers, are going to have to face, where it's like, I completely agree in the movement of like, hey, if you're going to have let's say, an uplifting movie about the struggles of being trans, maybe a trans person should write it. That totally makes sense. Of course, everything's a spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, like if you went as far as you could with that notion, you'd only be allowed to write about your own life, things that happen to you. You know what I mean? Like, well, you should only write about stuff that happened to you because you can speak to that. Right. Well, that's too far. Well, where is the comfortable line that's happy for everyone in the middle? I don't know. I think we're all collectively trying to figure that out.
Yeah, and I feel like you would hate the notion that, like, all right, well, as the system currently exists, the majority of Hollywood screenwriters are presumably cis white dudes, and so if they're only allowed to write Taken or whatever, then there is a degree. Or maybe they should just step aside. I don't know. It's really interesting.
No, keep going.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying is you can't only
I'm on board.
You can't only have biopics. You can't only have autobiographical, right? Like just like a trans writer should be able to write Die Hard if they want. Like what the fuck?
Well, it's more just that
make them ups.
If say Martin McDonagh was only allowed to, and just to get away from this so that I don't get anything weird, if Martin McDonagh was only allowed to write about Irish films, and say Irish Hollywood, Dublin
like Irish
wood.
Cultural touchstones or whatever. Yeah,
I don't have any problem with that. I more mean that it would be a bummer if some of your greatest writers weren't allowed to dip into other things, even if they could handle it well arbitrarily. But I guess ideally what they would do is they would be able to, like, one of the things that I think one of my favorite shows of the last couple of years was Watchmen, and obviously the showrunner was a white guy. Even though it dealt with a lot of racial themes. I do think he did a really good job of assembling a writer's room of people that experienced that more directly. And I don't know if you saw any interviews with him, but one of the things he said was he only took writers. He didn't take writers that say it was going to suck or like, how dare he? And he didn't take writers that said it was going to be amazing. He only took writers that were like, I really think this could be problematic. And he's like, that's what I want. He's like, I know it could help me.
You need people checking you. Yeah.
So,
especially if you're coming from the place of I'm in the demographic that needs to be checked. I have the unexamined biases. I have that privilege.
Yeah. So maybe it's just more movies should be co-written in a way that's fair
Yeah.
Or,
for sure.
I think,
but at
as
the
a
but I
writer's
also
rooms
agree that
work, like,
yeah.
so we can do that. It's tough because sometimes when you're working with a budget, you need to have one unified vision.
Yeah.
And a committee can, make those waters murky. But absolutely, when it's the construction of the thing, from a level of like, what are we trying to say?
Yeah.
What are we going for? Well, that can all happen for free before the production even starts. So I don't know. I think that we can do a lot better with that. I think we've gotten very easy, especially as you mentioned TV as an example. I hated the Watchmen, but
Oh,
that's,
man.
it's all up to taste. I'd rather go to something like Lovecraft Country for something like that. But like,
I don't like Lovecraft Country. That's
I'm
funny.
liking Lovecraft Country quite a bit.
But I think when it comes down to it, it's about like trying to make sure that you cut a place in the room for multiple voices and multiple contrasting voices, most importantly.
Sure.
That will yield ultimately a better, more fuller discussion of what you wish to discuss. And if you don't, and you are flippant about those things, I think we should ding you.
Yeah.
And that's it's not cancel culture as much as, hey,
Checking each
you
other.
didn't do that work. It's
Yeah.
like me going and like, please paint my house.
Yeah.
You missed a spot. I'm gonna call it out at you, and maybe you shouldn't get as much money. Maybe you did a shitty job, and maybe we should not hire you again. That's the extension of cancel culture, but there's many things to do in between, where it's just like, well, people aren't as enthusiastic about like what you make anymore.
Your house painting company. 'Cause
You
miss
refuse
spots
to
a lot.
learn.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely think there's a couple of interesting. We've just been talking about it a lot recently, me and some people, and one of the things is I'm mostly in defense of cancel culture stuff, and I've just been having this argument a lot. And one of the things is, I think what you're just basically saying. One is just like, I mean, it's not the sexiest term, but it's pure capitalism, right? Like if people don't want to watch your movie, they don't have to watch your movie, and they can pick any freaking reason they want to not watch your movie. They can pick it because they don't think you're the guy to do it.
They think it's problematic. They could not watch it because they think it wasn't problematic enough. People are crazy.
Exactly.
I mean,
so you're not owed anything money-wise.
It is pure capitalism in the sense of that is your purchase power in this system that we have.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's not. The important part isn't that it is or isn't capitalism. The important part is it's self-policing.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
It's so that's what I guess.
It's also
Adam Smith was talking about it with the invisible hand, but the point is, it is self-policing. It is a group of people making an assessment on itself.
Yeah,
that's the important.
And
part.
the entire extended universe of all fiction creates a meta narrative that normalizes. You know what I mean? Like stories are the way we tell ourselves this is what life is like.
Sure.
And
right.
So if you don't have that multiplicity of voices, you are deluding yourself into saying life is like this one thin slice of perspective. That's what life is like. But you missed the spot. So yeah, I agree with that.
A big spot.
Absolutely.
Because life is multicultural.
Yeah,
and
but
we refuse to learn that lesson for decades.
Also something beautiful about, or like the appeal of being in fiction to me is that I get to do an empathetic act of imagination and pretend what it would be like to be in different circumstances or a different type of person.
Sure.
So it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see both sides, but I am, like you, Jordan, largely in defense of cancel culture. Even the rare cases where you're like, I guess that was a little extreme. It's like, so 1 out of 1,000 people, like most of the people who get canceled either super deserve it or I don't know. If you're worried about XYZ specific case of someone getting canceled, all I'll say is you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet. And like, that's nothing compared to all the stifled voices that have been stifled for hundreds of years.
Right.
Like if 1 or 2 old white men gets accidentally canceled, I'm not really sweating it that much.
What? Okay,
Even if that happens to me, I'll take that hit.
What are the like good examples of people actually being canceled? Because it's like, somebody who's potentially raped somebody, that's not being canceled. That's like a crime,
Well,
like
it is.
all the Me
I think
Too
it's
stuff.
both. Like I would say the Me Too movement is responsible for Harvey Weinstein finally being brought to justice. People knew that he was a criminal before that, but it took the public cancellation of him and the public fury for our society to be like, yeah, you go to jail.
Well, sure, but I guess what I mean is like if I'm somebody who says I'm against cancel culture, I don't think you would say, but the rapist Harvey Weinstein should be like, I'm so against cancel culture, I hate what happened to him. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like the people that say...
I think there are people in our circles who genuinely think Louis C.K. was unfairly canceled, which is ridiculous to me. But I've heard that espoused.
Okay. All right. That might be
quote
a better
unquote,
example
all
then.
he did was whip his dick out.
Because I feel like James Gunn
technically
was like an example.
Physically rape anyone, but it is a crime. That's my point. Yeah,
well, that's my point.
I guess that's what I'm saying.
It's also not cancel culture if they did a crime.
So you're saying what's the example of the person who's unfairly canceled?
Yeah,
I think they're hard to think of because it's largely blown out of proportion.
Well,
most of the people who get canceled did crimes.
Well, that's what I mean. Like James Gunn is a person that I might actually be in defense of. But the
there's
dude
one.
got freaking...
he got canceled and then uncanceled.
Yeah, now he's
shit.
got double the movies essentially because he got folded into DC. So I guess
that's the other thing is the people who rail against cancel culture are usually like Dave Chappelle rails against cancel culture and then gets a $50 million deal.
Yeah,
and
he's
goes
doing
home.
fine. So that's the thing.
Fine.
Is like it's like they're either criminals who should go to jail or
they're
it
not
doesn't
really
seem to affect
canceled.
them. And so I'm just I when we talk about cancel culture with people, I'm always like, what are you worried about? What are we talking about? If you committed a crime, you should be worried for things besides what Twitter says.
Yeah,
and
I
then,
haven't heard anyone not get a job because they are just have weird thoughts. You know, like maybe someone
I'm sure
might not want to work
exists.
with them.
Maybe
Was Roseanne?
in lower
Did
levels.
Roseanne do anything? Did Roseanne get canceled?
She
got
made
kicked off her
some
show. I guess
racist
that's
stuff, and
but
got
that's
kicked
a
off her show.
choice.
Okay, maybe
that
that's
you made
a more
publicity
clear
out of our
example.
show.
But again,
That
it is an
nonsense.
extreme privilege to star in a multicam sitcom named after you. Not a right. You don't have a right to that.
Yeah,
you
right.
can lose it for any number of reasons. You can lose that privileged position. It's easy to lose. You know,
Yeah.
if I said racist shit and I worked in a factory, if the factory was well managed, I would get fired.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's a good example. Roseanne is one that I hadn't thought of, where, as far as I'm aware, she hasn't committed a crime, and she did.
She just said mean shit. Yeah.
And she appears to have actually been punished in a way that wouldn't have happened if Twitter or whatever hadn't freaked out. So, okay, there are some examples. I just, whenever I get in these conversations, I'm like, no, criminal, has like 7 movies coming up, so that doesn't count.
But
But
wasn't really
Roseanne is a good
canceled.
one. Yeah. Okay.
They were viral for one day on Twitter, but they still work regularly. I wouldn't really call it canceled. Yeah,
That's what I mean. It's like I think sometimes it feels overblown to the extent that you're like, maybe we should think of a different way to take people out.
Cancel culture really is a thing. But I mean, I don't know. Yeah, like I just copy paste what Mike was saying about like you got millions of dollars, Roseanne. You know, like you're fine.
You're good.
If you're not a criminal, you're fine.
I would love to be canceled. You know, to
Take
have
a nap.
the ability to have a career where I'm getting millions of dollars and can make what I want,
and then lose
me?
it. That meant you had it. Yeah.
I mean that. Yeah, if I like had to do a Faustian kind of thing where I probably would think about
where
it
it's
and
like,
say,
do you
probably
wanna-
not. I'll be fine just doing my little podcast.
Yeah, if the devil
I
was like,
guess.
you'll have 25 years of a creatively fulfilling career in this industry, and then at the end of it, you will be compelled to say something racist and get canceled. Would you accept the
You'll
deal?
be compelled. That's the deal. Yeah,
The
probably
devil
not.
will just
I
do
probably
it.
wouldn't do it.
Apparently,
I don't-
that's a actually very common. So the Atlantic writes a bunch of articles about happiness, and they went. I think it was like 60% of high level athletes would take a drug that would make them win every sporting event they ever did for 5 years and then die.
Wow.
And they were like,
Oh,
"That's
okay.
worth it. Hell yeah! Give me
That's
5 years of
crazy.
success." And then
Instant
nothing.
gratification. That's all I need.
Instant, yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
So
That's
25
an
years
interesting
isn't bad.
philosophical- Good show, good episode.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for
Thanks.
hopping on with us, Jordan. I've been wanting to
Jordan.
talk Seven Psychopaths for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, we've cleverly alluded to what you're up to, but why don't you let people know officially what you're up to and where they can check you out?
Yeah, I am making crack stuff again and trying to keep the dream alive as best I can. So YouTube, search Cracked. Anything since April is mine. Everything else is stuff you should check out because it's great.
Yeah, man. And if they're hiring, let us know.
They are, actually.
They can't afford me.
Okay, well, just they literally
Boom.
today we wrote it. We wrote the job
That is
description. So if you want it,
Fucking
man,
hilarious.
I wonder, Abe, do you think we could get jobs at Cracked if we applied now?
I don't know if I have the qualifications.
I think it might be fun to find that job listing and apply under a fake name with my real credentials and see if I get the job.
dude,
I bet you could.
you would come to me.
Oh, you'd interview me?
Yeah,
I'll wear a mustache. I'll
Hell
wear a mustache
yeah.
or something.
I'd be like,
yeah.
show me your
sign.
portfolio. Show me. Do you think
And
you
I
get
will-
the cracked voice?
Do you get the cracked voice? Yeah. I'd be like, yeah. It's anything that you count down in a list
Yeah.
format.
Right. It's a
That's
stand-up
all.
routine.
It's as
give or
simple
take.
as that.
Yeah.
I'll walk across the floor and be like, and this is your edit machine, yes? You
Sir, that's a
as
bowl
you
of
insert
candy.
the footage here.
As Michael destroys every computer in the office, and they're all just fritzing.
No, we appreciate you keeping the dream alive.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful dream. It's nice to know that there's a lone fire burning in the trenches.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a very weird, unexpected thing that
Weird,
just
wild stuff.
it just kind of happened one day. So
That's
well,
right. That's how it happens, listeners. One day, you too might just suddenly work at Cracked.
It's
It just happens.
legitimately
That's how it happens.
That's how it
that's
goes.
basically what happened. So just hope for that, I suppose.
Until that beautiful day, this is Frame Rate. I'm Swaim Frame.
I'm Abe Frame.
We frame you for murder. Okay.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.